Here Sunday nights at 9.
Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Pete Buttigieg, mayor of South Bend, who is...
He's a rising star in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, rising star. Is there any more overused term than that? A grassroots movement behind Buttigieg. You know what the grassroots movement is? The D.C. press corps. He doesn't exist without the D.C. press corps grabbing onto the kid and trying to elevate him. He was on CNN, one of the culprits, yesterday. He had this to say about capitalism in his very Dick Durbian, reasonable tone of voice, which makes whatever he says reasonable. But does it?
Well, I think the reason we're having this argument over socialism and capitalism is that capitalism has let a lot of people down. I guess what I'm out there to say is that it doesn't have to be so. I believe in democratic capitalism, but the Democratic Party is extremely important. I think during this Cold War, there was this assumption that capitalism and democracy were almost the same thing, that if you were for capitalism, you're also for democracy. Right now, we actually see democracy and capitalism coming into tension. It was very alarming to hear recently that one of the president's economic advisors said that between capitalism and democracy, he would choose capitalism. I would say the reverse ought to be true, that at the end of the day, we prioritize democracy. And, you know, having that framework of a rule of law, of fairness, is actually what it takes for markets to work.
He is a real sophist. He's much better, I will give him credit, than the sophist he's competing against. But let me borrow from my dog, Frederick von Hayek.
Okay.
Well, my dog is named after Frederick
Exactly.
von Hayek. Yeah.
And you donned that T-shirt very well that says Hayek.
Thank you very much. To be controlled in our economic pursuits is to be controlled in everything. So you can't have a free society without free markets. Capitalism has let people down. What is capitalism? What are free markets? They're not abstractions. You know what it is? Simply, people freely exchanging goods and services to mutual benefit. That's it. That's what it is. Human beings. You know, like corporations are comprised of human beings. They're not otherworldly abstractions, despite the way the left talks about them. Just human beings working in an organized fashion, voluntarily. What Mayor Pete and his crew don't like is the voluntary part. They like the force part. And fairness is their euphemism for force. This is a conversation we best have. We rinse and repeat for the next year and a half leading up to 2020. Because if we don't understand the distinction, and if we don't understand the rhetorical scam being run by politicians like Mayor Pete, then we're in deep bandini. He went on to give more sentimental bull jive for Democrat socialist consumption. The bigger you are, the bigger your responsibility.
The bigger you are, the more responsibility you have. What if your responsibilities
that's interesting.
Anything
You're
from reporting on gender pay disparity in your organization, which I think most of us agree is more of a fair thing to do for a large organization than for a small one, to potentially even wages and labor standards. We're graduated at a progressive level where the bigger you are, the more we expect you to be among the very best in how you treat your workers and how you treat the communities where you operate.
We're going to graduate the rules of the game by company size. Where are the cutoffs? I mean, there's no follow-ups asked to these questions because they're so starry-eyed. CNN panel. Oh, that's interesting. Gosh, I've never heard that before. Oh, sounds so enlightened. Oh, my knees are weak.
Oh, God.
What the hell is wrong with people? What are you talking about? Different laws governing different sized companies when it comes to terms of employment? What? All right, to bring us back from this woozy dreamland, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal columnist, chief economist for CNN, and, of course, nominee for the Fed Board of Governors. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, guys.
So what about Mayor Pete's formulation that capitalism has let a lot of people down? That's why we need the small d Democrat form of capitalism.
Well, first of all, that quote from the mayor about, capitalism being more important than democracy, actually, the advisor was me. I think capitalism and democracy, or at least our representative form of government, are both go hand in hand. You know,
Yes.
you're right, Dan. They're all both about freedom, and you can't have a representative form of government with socialism because you lose all your economic freedoms. And you know, when the mayor says that capitalism has let people down, compared to what? I mean, tell me anywhere where socialism hasn't let people down, and whether it's, you know, in Venezuela or whether it's Korea or whether it's in Cuba or any of these places. So I thought it was you know, kind of this utopian vision that he's talking about, but I don't understand how taking away people's freedoms, you know, the freedom to trade, right? The freedom for you and I to trade voluntarily is a fundamental human right, I believe. And I think a lot of these, quote, progressives would take that fundamental freedom away from us.
Well, he made it sound, too, like you'd have to choose between capitalism and democracy. And that was just, it's a strange thought to me. What do you think?
Well, look, we do a study every year at the Heritage Foundation called the Economic Freedom Index of the World, and we rate the countries by their economic freedom. And these are things I think everybody knows: private property rights, rule of contract, you know, freedom to trade, low taxes, less government, you know, less corruption, and so on. And not only do we find that economic freedom, as I would define as free enterprise, is highly correlated with growth. I mean, I don't think anybody's surprised that the more free enterprise you are, the more your economy grows and the richer people get. But we also found all these other indicators are highly tied towards you know, correlated to free economic freedom. For example, health outcomes are highly you know, correlated with countries that have economic freedom, meaning the more economic freedom you have, the better health you have. Environmental protection. Do you know that, Dan and Amy? Environmental protection is highly correlated with economic freedom. Lower infant mortality rates, you know, the higher life expectancy, it's all correlated. So economic freedom is fundamental to all of these other things liberals say they want to achieve.
There's a great op-ed in Wall Street Journal yesterday from Phil Gramm, former Senator Phil Gramm, talking about the enemies of economic enlightenment. And he writes that the crown jewel and greatest beneficiary of the Enlightenment has been America. Political movements are afoot now to seek to overturn the individual economic rights secured in the Enlightenment and return to a medieval world of subjects and subjugation. All these royal charters that are being proposed by the Democrat socialist candidates for president, from the wealth tax to Elizabeth Warren's housing proposal to just their general tone and attitude toward free minds and free markets.
Well, I saw that piece. I loved it because, you know, all of these things, I mean, economic freedom is so fundamental to everything Americans want. We want a fair society. We want a wealthy society. We want our kids to do better than we do. All of these alternatives to capitalism, you know, whether you call them socialism or Maoism or any of these, they're all associated with lower growth rates and your children doing worse and worse environment. By the way, there's more income inequality in countries that don't have capitalism. Did you know that?
Of course, because
so,
you're
keep talking about fairness.
Right.
The countries that are fairest are the countries that the thing that's great about America is, you know, there's how many hundreds and thousands and millions of examples are there of people who've come into this country with literally only their shirt on their back, and they become rich.
Well,
you can't do that in a socialist country.
And that's Graham's point. In the royal charters, the Democrat socialist vision, you are a serf working for the feudal lord, like it is here in Chicago. People should understand that here, as opposed to in a real market economy, as what Gramm and others are suggesting. Speaking of which, Comrade Bernie, his Fox News town hall the other night, suggested that, the Trump tax cuts, maybe 94% of Americans paid less in taxes as a result, but 83% of the benefit went to the top 1%. That's unfair, Steve Moore.
Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, I've run the numbers. You know, the average family in the United States has gained about $3,000 of after-tax income. By the way, that's not just due to the tax cut. I mean, the less taxes taken out. It's due to the fact that wages are rising now. People have more economic opportunities. Benefits to workers are going up. I mean, all of these things have been highly associated with the tax cut. I'm very proud of it. I think this idea, most Democrats I see are running on the platform of repealing the tax cut, which would be the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. I mean, why would you want to repeal something that has been such a roaring success?
All right. Yesterday, your friend Larry Kudlow came out and said that you and Herman Cain are still in the running as potential Fed candidates, but they're interviewing other people. Do you know who those other people are?
Well, Larry, in fact, I just saw Larry not yesterday, but the day before. We're all in. We're going to get this thing done. It's going to be a huge success. We haven't lost a single Republican. I'm talking about for me. So
Right.
we feel good. We feel really good about where we are on this right now.
Yeah, Steve.
Okay.
Steve's good.
We're we
Herman.
want you.
Herman.
Yeah, no, it's
Herman
all
Cain.
positive.
Yeah, Herman Cain might have a little bit of rough sailing ahead. We'll see. Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal columnist, chief economist for CNN, and future Fed Board of Governors, member of the Fed Board of Governors. Steve, thanks so much for joining us.
Have a
Appreciate
great
it.
week.
You too. See you.
Thanks. And he joined us